At 6:40 on a grey Tuesday morning, 3 HOA board members stood behind their privacy fence staring through the chain link at a building they had mocked for months. The old brick factory behind their subdivision had been dark, broken, and useless for years. Windows boarded. Loading bays chained. Weeds growing through cracked concrete. They thought it would stay that way forever. Or so they confidently assumed. Then one morning the gates rolled open. A low diesel rumble shook the back lot first. Then came 2 service trucks, a flatbed hauling steel, a mobile welder, and a forklift easing a massive engine stand through the side entrance. Fresh signs were mounted before sunrise. Safety striping had been painted across the floor. New bay lights glowed inside the factory like somebody had brought the whole place back from the dead overnight. By the time the HOA president arrived in her SUV, the smell of cutting oil and hot metal was already drifting across the fence line. She stepped out holding a folder, ready to shut something down, then stopped cold when she saw county permit tags zip-tied to the front gate and a licensed contractor unlocking the main shop doors beside me. That was the moment they realized I had not bought an abandoned headache. I had bought leverage, space, access, and the one property their rules could not touch. If you were standing there with me, what would you have done next? Drop it in the comments. Tell me what state you are watching from, and welcome to Behind HOA Stories. My name is Cole Mercer, and I did not buy that old factory by accident. I bought it because I had spent 12 years building diesel fleets for other companies, fixing their breakdowns at midnight, keeping their trucks moving through storms, harvest seasons, and construction deadlines, while they made fortunes off equipment they barely understood. After a while, I stopped wanting another raise. I wanted a base of my own. The factory sat on the back edge of a polished HOA development where every mailbox matched, every lawn looked staged, and every board member acted like property lines gave them authority over the horizon itself. Most people only saw a dead building. I saw a reinforced concrete shell, oversized bay access, industrial power history, truck turnaround room, and one priceless advantage. It was already separated from their neighborhood by fencing, drainage land, and an old service road. That place had been empty for nearly 9 years. Before that, it housed a machine parts operation, then a farm equipment rebuilder, then nothing. Roof panels needed replacement. The office windows were shot. The loading docks were rusted. But the bones were still there, heavy, square, and built for work, not appearances. In my line of business, that matters more than paint. The best part was that nobody serious wanted it. Developers thought it was too ugly. Retail investors thought it was too far from the highway. The HOA crowd just called it an eyesore behind their homes and assumed whoever bought it would either demolish it or leave it sleeping. I did neither. I bought it because the county records showed something most people never bothered to check. The parcel had an older industrial use history, direct utility access, and legal entry routes the subdivision could not block just because they disliked noise, steel, or diesel smoke. The day I signed closing papers, I already knew I was not purchasing a problem. I was purchasing a future they were going to hate. The HOA did not introduce themselves like neighbors. They introduced themselves like supervisors who believed the view behind their homes belonged to them, even when the property did not. Their president was Elaine Porter, a woman with a polished voice, perfect jackets, and the kind of smile that only appeared when she thought she was about to corner someone with paperwork. 2 board members usually moved with her, nodding before she finished speaking, as if agreement itself were part of the bylaws. I met them 3 days after closing. They were waiting at the chain link gate when I arrived with a locksmith and a roofing contractor. Elaine held a folder against her chest and asked whether I planned to improve the visual situation before I started any real work. I asked what that meant. She glanced at the building and said the residents had no interest in living behind a noisy industrial site, especially one that could attract trucks, mechanics, fuel smells, and that type of activity. That phrase told me everything. She was not asking what I planned to do. She was measuring how easily I could be pushed. I kept the conversation short. I told her I had purchased the parcel legally, I was securing the structure, and any future use would follow county requirements, not neighborhood preferences. She smiled again, but this time it looked strained. Then she said the board would be reviewing all available options, and suggested I should think carefully before investing too much money into something that might become difficult to operate. That was their first real move, not a threat strong enough to challenge, just vague enough to unsettle. But people like Elaine make the same mistake over and over. They confuse confidence with control. And once they think fear will do the work for them, they start overplaying their hand long before the real fight begins. Over the next 3 weeks, Elaine and her board stopped pretending they were merely concerned neighbors. The letters started first. One claimed I was creating a future nuisance before any business had even opened. Another warned that heavy vehicle traffic could reduce surrounding property values. A third questioned whether I had the right to use the old service road that had existed longer than half the subdivision. Every message was written in that same polished tone, careful, smug, and designed to sound official without actually carrying legal weight. I answered none of them emotionally. Instead, I started building a file. Every notice went into a binder. Every conversation got logged with date, time, and who said what. When Elaine cornered me outside the gate to say the neighborhood would not tolerate an industrial eyesore coming back to life, I wrote it down before my truck door even shut. When a board member parked near the entrance taking pictures through the fence, I saved the security footage. When someone placed orange cones across the service road one morning, trying to make my contractors turn around, I photographed the obstruction, removed it, and sent the images to the county access office before lunch. That was their first expensive mistake. The second came when they started making calls they did not understand. Elaine filed complaints about noise before there were noisemakers inside. She asked for inspection reviews on fuel storage before a single tank had been installed. She pushed the county zoning desk to question my renovation plans, assuming the parcel would be treated like a fresh commercial application instead of what it actually was, an older industrial site with continuing use protections. Every time she pushed, she created a paper trail. And every time the county responded, the truth moved a little more clearly into my favor. Meanwhile, I stayed busy with work they could not stop. Roof crews replaced damaged panels. Electricians tested old conduit runs. Concrete contractors repaired the cracked loading apron. I kept permits posted, inspections scheduled, and contractors licensed. I gave them nothing reckless to attack. That made Elaine even more dangerous, because people who fail quietly often escalate loudly. By the end of the month, the board was no longer trying to scare me off. They were trying to manufacture enough confusion, delay, and pressure to make the project bleed money before it ever opened. What they still did not understand was simple. I had already planned for resistance. And the more aggressively they moved, the more evidence they handed me for the fight that was coming next. The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon inside the county records office, where a clerk handed me a packet thick enough to explain why the HOA had been acting so confident, and why that confidence was built on bad assumptions. Buried in the parcel history were use maps, archived permits, and a classification trail showing the factory had never fully lost its industrial standing. It had gone inactive, not extinct. That distinction changed everything. Most people think an empty property resets itself just because it sits long enough. It does not. Not always. In this case, the site still carried older utility designations, freight access notes, and a grandfathered operating profile tied to prior mechanical and agricultural equipment work. The county planner walked me through it line by line. As long as I stayed within code, completed the required safety upgrades, and operated inside the approved use envelope, the HOA could complain all day and still have no authority to shut me down. That alone was strong. But there was more. The service road Elaine kept hinting could be restricted was protected through recorded access language tied to the parcel long before the subdivision existed. The drainage strip between the fence and the lot line, the one they treated like a private buffer, was not theirs either. And the biggest surprise sat in the utility file. The site had been built for heavier electrical demand than I even expected, which meant converting the building into a diesel garage was not only possible, it was unusually practical. Suddenly the whole fight looked different. Elaine thought she was dealing with an abandoned nuisance that needed permission to come back to life. She was not. She was dealing with a legally surviving industrial property owned by someone patient enough to read every page before turning on a single wrench. I left that office with copies, maps, stamped records, and the calmest mood I had been in since closing day. Because once you know the ground under you is solid, pressure stops feeling like danger. It starts feeling like a countdown. Once I had the records, I stopped treating the project like a renovation and started running it like an opening. That change mattered. Repairs became timelines. Timelines became deliveries. Deliveries became proof. Within 10 days, the factory no longer looked abandoned. It looked claimed. We cleared the office wing first, then the main floor. Rotten shelving came out. Broken partitions came down. Old machine anchors were cut flush. The concrete was cleaned, patched, and sealed. New lead bay lights went up in rows bright enough to expose every stain the building had collected over the last decade. By the second week, 2 heavy truck lifts were installed, a fabrication corner was framed, compressed air lines were routed, and a parts cage was built beside the rear wall. Then the outside changed. Gravel trucks dressed the side lot. Fresh striping marked equipment lanes. A legal signboard went up with the business name, permit numbers, and contractor information in plain view from the fence. Every improvement was deliberate. I wanted no mystery and no weakness. If the HOA looked over that fence, I wanted them to see the same thing the county saw: compliance, investment, and momentum. That was when the panic started. Elaine drove by twice in one day, then 3 times the next. One board member stood at the fence pretending to take a phone call while watching a rollback unload a disabled fleet truck into Bay 2. Another photographed the new sign like he expected the lettering itself to be illegal. But there was nothing hidden to attack. The fire inspection passed. Electrical sign-off cleared. Access remained open. Contractors kept moving. And the sound changed everything. Impact guns. Air tools. Diesel idle. Steel on steel. Not chaos. Work. Real work. The kind of sound that tells everyone nearby something permanent is happening. By the end of that week, the old factory behind their neighborhood had a new identity. It was no longer an eyesore they could complain about. It was a fully forming diesel garage, legally alive, commercially useful, and growing louder with every hour they failed to stop it. Elaine made her last move on a Monday. At 8:15 that morning, a courier handed me a cease and desist packet claiming my operation threatened residential peace, exceeded acceptable use, and should be halted pending emergency review. The language looked expensive. The timing looked planned. By noon, the HOA had circulated word through the neighborhood that county officials were finally stepping in. They wanted residents believing the garage was finished before it had fully opened. What they did not know was that the county had already seen everything. I walked into the review meeting 2 days later with a contractor folder, inspection sign-offs, parcel maps, recorded access documents, utility confirmations, and the old industrial use file Elaine had spent a month accidentally strengthening with her own complaints. She arrived with a board attorney, 2 nervous members, and the same confidence she always wore right before facts ruined it. The county planner spoke first. Then zoning. Then fire compliance. One by one, every issue the HOA raised got answered with documents already on record. Access was valid. Use history was protected. Safety upgrades were complete. Traffic concerns were speculative. Noise claims had no violation attached. Even the service road argument collapsed when the recorded easement was read aloud across the room. You could feel the air leave their side of the table. Elaine tried one last angle, arguing that the garage was incompatible with the surrounding community character. The planner shut that down in a single sentence. Community preference was not legal authority over a separately governed parcel. That was the moment the fight ended. Not with a shout. Not with a threat. With silence. By the time the meeting closed, the emergency request was denied, the cease and desist had no teeth, and the same board that had tried to bury my project had just watched the county confirm it was fully allowed to operate. Publicly. On record. In front of everyone who mattered. 3 months after that meeting, the old factory behind the HOA no longer looked abandoned, controversial, or temporary. It looked successful. Diesel pickups lined the side lot before sunrise. Fleet accounts dropped off service orders every week. Owner-operators came in for diagnostics, injectors, brakes, wiring, and rebuild work. The bays stayed full. The lights stayed on. The doors kept opening. And the fence never stopped being there. That part always made me smile. Because on the other side of it sat the same people who once called a place an eyesore, a threat, and a mistake. Now they heard the clean rhythm of a business they could not block, could not vote against, and could not shame out of existence. They wanted silence. Instead, they got proof that useful property does not need their approval to matter. I did not buy that factory to make a point. I bought it to build something durable. The point made itself. And every time another diesel truck rolls through those gates, the neighborhood behind me gets reminded of one simple fact. I was never the one trapped by that fence.